Rumor has it, the Dresden Files could be getting another TV adaptation. And here on the channel, I've been going through how I would map it out while following the rumored formula that they appear to be planning to use. Today, we're going to talk about season 3, which is all about the White Court.
The Belated Binge Podcast.
Hi, welcome to Belated Binge. I'm Zach, former radio host and lifelong sports fan who is now discovering the magic of urban fantasy. And today, spoiler warning for everything for the Dresden Files through Battleground. Please subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. So, if you saw my first couple of videos where I was doing this, I am going through how I would envision a TV adaptation for the Dresden Files while following the formula that seems to be the plan for a potential attempt at another adaptation of the series. And the rumor is that they are going to be using the multi-book plotline of the Red Court War and Susan Rodriguez and that piece to readapt the show to TV. And so what I wanted to do is say, okay, let's take it beyond that. How do we take that idea and have a TV show for the entirety of the Dresden universe? And so I've done season 1, which was the Red Court. I've done season 2, which was the Knights of the Cross. Now we are into season 3 in this hypothetical world, and we're going to go to the White Court of vampires. Now, the reason that I'm thinking this is because at the end of the day, as I've said on previous videos, what this story is at its core is built upon the characters and their relationships. It is a supernatural, chaotic ride of just mass magic and battles and Harry being sarcastic, and it's a fantastic series. It lends itself very well, I think, to a TV adaptation, but at its core, I think what truly brings people back and gets them really entrenched in this are the relationships. And there is there are very few relationships that are more important to Harry Dresden than that of Thomas Wraith, his half-brother, who is a White Court vampire. And to this point, we may or may not have even seen him in the show. Because, like I said, we did the Red Court in season 1, which was all about that set of vampires. We did the Knights of the Cross in season 2, and I feel like it could confuse people if you add too many supernatural elements to the show without context and without really like giving them the explanation and giving them their introduction. And it could just be too many elements going on at all at once for the plot line that you're actually trying to follow. So at this point, we may not have even seen Thomas, and season 3 is far too long into a TV show to not get to see Thomas. And so with Thomas comes the White Court, comes Lara Wraith. And I think you've got a really solid multi-book plotline that you can follow with them. Now, the books that this would largely be following in the series would be Blood Rights, because I don't know that, again, we may not have introduced Thomas yet in like the Red Court stuff, where he shows up in Grave Peril, and where he shows up in Death Masks. Like he was in those in the books, but we didn't really understand who he was and like the role he was going to play. He was just sort of this vampire that seemed to be taking an interest in Harry, and we didn't really know why. In Blood Rights, we found out why. And so I think that you can have them, you can intro Thomas there, and you can have a bit of an explanation that like Harry and this vampire know each other, even if we haven't seen it on screen. And I think that I think with every TV show, they get away with doing that kind of stuff all the time. I think that showrunners are smart enough to figure out a way to do this in a smart way. So I think you can do that, and you obviously have Thomas give Harry his case at the porn studio, which will be very interesting to see them try to show on TV. Maybe it'll be an HBO Max series, and we won't have to worry so much about how in the world they're going to manage to incorporate a, 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 a porn set on screen for television. Yeah, you know what? That's somebody else's problem. We're here to adapt the source material, and that is what the source material was. And I think you've got a good foundation for the show because it is a case that Harry would be working on, and so you've got an excuse to kind of get him in there. You can intro Lara Wraith within that as well, and I think that this first episode ends with the confrontation that was happening with Lara, and I think maybe I you probably have to have the fight happen, or depending on how much of the action that you've shown with the entropy curse up until that point, um, maybe you've had enough action. So I think that you check the temperature on the episode itself, to determine exactly at what point this ends, but you either end it at the start of the confrontation with Lara, where she kind of like maybe she like walks out of the shadows and shows herself with 2 guns aiming at them, and, like, that's the end of the episode. Or if you haven't had enough, like, action to feel like you're in the first episode of a season and you wanna make sure that you grip people, maybe you go ahead and have them have their altercation and then have the episode end when the Black Core vampires show up. Either way, I don't think it's a huge meaningful difference, because then in episode 2, what you're doing, is you're essentially taking that altercation that just happened and you're like, "Oh, crap, we have to actually work together now because these Black Core vampires are gonna be a problem." And that's episode 2. You have the fight with the Black Core vampires, you've got Thomas who's been shot and is super weak, and I think you start it with the fight and then you end it at Chateau Wraith where they're going to have to try to save Thomas's life, and like throughout that we're getting some character building, we're getting some like back and forth, we're getting some dialogue, we're getting some meaningful relationship building for the believability of the show, to kind of show that like yes, we have to reinforce the fact that Lara and Harry did not come together as like friends. They actually came together very much as adversaries. And she was trying to kill him. But then we can immediately see that once they have their truce, they can actually work pretty well together. And I think this is a really meaningful and important concept to really drive home at the beginning of the season because that's going to be incredibly important later. But I think that you can play up the fact that like they don't like each other so that you have that like relationship kind of building throughout the season as they like start off do not like each other. We're under a truce simply for the fact that Thomas needs help and we need to save his life. And then, of course, Thomas needs to be saved. You can intro Justine. And up until this point, you probably have Thomas like talking about Justine to Harry so that there's at least a recognition and people have a reason to care that she's about to essentially sacrifice herself to save Thomas, um, and make that build that tension between Harry and Thomas that is there in the books about this because the one thing that we know about Harry is that he really had a problem with the idea that Justine was just like willing to give up her life to save Thomas's, and he is not a fan of Thomas for being able to do that. And at this point, he doesn't really understand the whole like white court vampire thing that Thomas like it was either like he has to do the thing to survive. Um and because they don't have the connection yet, that was really heavy in the book between the two characters, and I think that you can I think there's a way to really portray that well on screen so that in episode 3 you can have the next day pretty much go down just the way that it did in the books because it's a huge character episode. You can have Thomas's sister like be set up with Lord Wraith, who you would have introed in episode 2 because he shows up when they're trying to save Thomas and get it back to the house. And you can have him, setting the plan in motion to have Harry be his daughter's like first and really turn her into a true white core vampire. Like that can all take place in order to build some tension and have some immediate like real time action happening, even though it's not a big like it's not a huge fight, but like Harry's life is absolutely in danger in that moment. So you can have that to build some tension for Harry in the immediate, and then you know Thomas comes in, and ultimately the thing that drives this episode is the reveal that Thomas is Harry's half brother, right? And at least you are on the third episode. You've been wondering what the heck has been going on with these two, and like why are we here? What are we doing? You're not wasting too much time, but you've had a chance to build some anticipation, and you do this basically exactly like it was in the book in terms of between the two characters. And like I think that the way that you can get some more action into this episode, because you kind of have to have it, right? For a TV show like this that's going to be high on action, you can't have a whole episode go where there's not really action. It's literally all character building. You want people to stay engaged and locked in so that the character building actually hits home. And I think a really interesting way that you can do that is to show some action within the soul gaze. So instead of manufacturing drama, like, altercation drama outside of it, you can have the tension between Harry and Thomas, but like they don't have to get in a fight or anything, just to have a fight scene or whatever. I think a better way to do that would be during the soul gaze and them getting to interact with their mother, and having stuff explained to them, and having the audience understand what Margaret Le Fay did in order to, give birth to Harry and keep her sons safe, and what she did specifically to Lord Wraith with her death curse. So you can reveal how she died, you can reveal what her death curse was, and you can give her backstory in this where maybe she like tells her story a little bit more about how she, managed to be in that situation, show her, um, show some of her life and some of the allies that she had made throughout her life and how it kind of went bad and how she was trying to get away. And I think you can show some scenes in that where the actual action of the episode that takes place is hers. And it's happening in these like flashback moments of her telling this story, and explaining it. That could be a really cool way to bring action to the episode without like having to manufacture something that is unneeded in the present day. So I think that would be really cool. And I think that you end that episode on the like, holy crap, we're brothers thing. And maybe they like, maybe they're, I don't know, maybe it's some like symbolic ending with both of them like pulling their pendants out or something, and seeing that they're matching. Like maybe that's the way that you end that on a cool thing. So that's Blood Rights. The next book that the White Court plotline is going to follow, for a large chunk of is White Knight. And so I think what we do is now that you've got the reveal, that Harry and Thomas are brothers, you've had Thomas like banished from the Wraith Chateau, and now you can have him and Harry together, and have Harry start to like uncover this plot where there's White Court involvement trying to overthrow the Wraith leadership within the White Court. And I think this is a cool way to intro like the nemesis part of this and kind of start hinting at Black Council stuff. I think you have Cowl in here because you have like the mental whammy that he gives Harry in the books. You can have them have some kind of altercation and have Cowl basically just lay him out or whatever. And then Harry figures out in that episode that he's working with somebody from the White Court, and like, oh, um, you know, that changes everything. And then, you move into episode number 5, and he actually like solves what the heck is going on. He figures out who is involved from the White Court. He has, more altercations with Cal. We start to see that there's something else happening, like a broader, enemy, if you will, and almost conspiracy. And at the end of the episode, like, Harry has figured this thing out, and he has challenged the couple of members of the White Court to like the duel in the deeps. And so that is what your episode 6 is going to be about. It's going to be about that duel. And I think this is a good time to have introduced Ramirez to the story. I know that technically in the TV show, we haven't actually had Deadbeat yet. And so we wouldn't have met Ramirez just yet. If we were staying like completely linear with the books, but I think that that's an easy thing to do. I think you can intro Ramirez in episode 4, 5, 6, like somewhere in this section, and have he and Harry getting along, right? And so the main thing that you don't maybe Harry just needs a representative from the council in order to do this duel, and Ramirez is down for the cause. Maybe that's how you set it up, because at this point in the TV show, Harry also hasn't become a warden because we haven't actually done anything with Deadbeat. So I think that that's a that is an acceptable way to get to the same like uh, to get to the same point without really just completely jacking up the canon. Because again, we can't tell this story in complete linear fashion that the books follow, because the showrunners and Jim Butcher have already told us that the first thing that they plan to do is to just follow the Red Court. Well, the Red Court goes through 3 books, from like books 3, I think it's like 3, 5, and 12 or something like that, in their actual chronological order. So like a lot of stuff happens in between. So in order to tell that story contained, there's going to be some things that we have to adjust. And I think meeting Ramirez and explaining how he and Harry are going to be doing this duel together without Harry being a warden, I think that's a small adjustment and a small sacrifice to make for those of us nerds who talk about the Dresden Files on the internet. I think we'll be okay with that. So that is what the um the 6th episode, and it falls, uh right there, kind of like basically in the middle of the season, and it's this big blow up um situation, and you have the duel. Basically, Harry and Ramirez are about to win, and all of a sudden, Cal shows up and all hell breaks loose. You can have all of that happen. You can even, I think, because we've done the Knights of the Cross in season 2, we can have already shown Harry, you know, uh, touching Lash's coin. And so we can have her intermittently, put into these previous episodes of this season as a continuation from last season, and still get an impactful um like culmination where she like slows down time, and they really talk about that, and they figure it out, and they like figure out a way to get out of this situation, and she sacrifices herself, and uh he and Lara do the super intense makeout scene and have a get shot out of the deeps like a cannonball. Like, I think you can do that mostly the way that it happened in the books without having to adjust too many things from the original canon. And I think that because, like I said earlier, we've been building Harry and Lara as like a good duo, a good team, if you will, even though there's not. And I mean, I would argue in the books that Lara has a thing for Dresden from a an attraction standpoint. Yeah, I think we can play with that throughout this season to make it look like she's kind of into it and he's kind of not, or at least like doesn't want to let himself be because she's a succubus and that's terrifying, and he doesn't want to die or get enthralled and be fed upon. But in this moment, he's like, I need that power. And then you can make that a real like intense thing that like she's eager to do. And he's like, we just gotta, this is how we have to do this and survive. And I think that could um, lend itself well to the screen. So the next two books that the White Court story is going to continue to follow in this adaptation would be Peace Talks and Battleground. And I think that you break them up and you just essentially follow the Thomas storyline for these like final four episodes of the TV show. Yeah, Harry and Lara are now, call them frenemies, if you will. Like I think at this point in time, we're kind of done doing the whole like I hate you, but we're under a truce so we can work together. I think after the events of the previous episode, we can just say like, all right, we're basically allies here. We may not always see eye to eye, but we're kind of in this together. And you can basically open it up with Thomas telling Harry that Justine is pregnant. Um, and end that episode with Thomas being captured by the Svartalfs. And the main thing that you're not going to have here is you're not going to have Harry like living with the Svartalfs. So that's like he has to find out another way, but it's not real hard to put him in a situation to be able to find out. Like maybe Lara heard something and he has to go, he tracks it down and he finds Thomas at the Svartalfs, and ta-da, we're there, as opposed to him, going back and there's a fire at his apartment building, and he's terrified for his daughter. We don't. You can play it that way, I guess, but like you don't have to play it that way. I think you've got some latitude there and some flexibility, and I think readers of the series will be okay with that. And so we've got Thomas captured, and that's episode 6, so that in episode 7, it's the Harry and Lara coming together. They're going to team up and they're going to save Thomas. And that episode goes pretty much the way that it goes in the books with a couple of things omitted. One, we haven't done the Fae yet. So there is no Mab telling Harry that he owes Lara these favors on her behalf. It doesn't need to be that. It can literally just be, I care about Thomas. You care about Thomas. Let's go get Thomas. And that's enough with these two characters. Like they've, that is still fully in line with who their characters are. So that is fine. We don't need that. And we don't have to have it be the peace talks, um, dinner that's happening at Marcone's with all the Fae and all the different factions and everybody there all at the same time. You can have it be a similar but like just slightly different kind of dinner happening. Like maybe the Swart Elves are hosting something, and Harry and Lara have to sneak their way in order to go save Thomas that way. That's an easy, again, small adjustment that doesn't force you to cross too many of the storylines where they converge. Because quite honestly, Peace Talks is where it starts to get really difficult to follow these like multi-book plot lines, because in Peace Talks, they all merge together and everybody's in the same place for Peace Talks and Battleground. And so you have to find ways to alter that a little bit in order to make it be, to make it feel like the books without it being the exact same thing, because you haven't set up all of these other factions to this point in the TV show. So I think that's a cool way to do it. We know that, like, for instance, the Svartalfs had that party that Molly in, shoot, I can't remember the name of it, but one of those short stories, like they were having a party and she went to try to save Thomas. She defused a bomb, and Thomas was actually just sleeping his way out of being captured. And so I think you can pull concepts from that, obviously without Molly being the main protagonist there, but you can pull concepts of that, like maybe it's that party and Harry and Lara have to, um, have to save Thomas from there. And then it can pretty much go down generally the way that it did in the books, whether or not you want to have like the the glamour of their like intense makeout scene in the middle of a random room. I guess that depends on whether people know that they're there or not. Whether you have that or if you just have them sneak in and then go down the fence and you don't have to have the, you know, sex in front of everybody. um, but either way, they save Thomas. That's your like huge action, and they get him to Demon Reach. And you can still play this as like because well, first of all, because if you didn't watch previously, we know that in season 2, we've already done the Knights of the Cross and we've already established Harry has a connection to Demon Reach. And so we've set that up already. So you can end this episode with them getting to Demon Reach and him imprisoning Thomas to save him. And he and Lara can fight if you want him to, because he didn't communicate that in the books very well. You can play that out as like pretty much as it was in the book. That is totally fine. Then you run into the events that happen in Battleground. And this is where we have to hope that we have more source material potentially. Because right now, obviously, Battleground is the last book that has happened in the series, and we don't have 12 months and beyond at this point in time to inform what our TV adaptation would be. But I think that um, if you don't already have it, then I think for TV you gotta take a couple of liberties here. And these are the liberties that I'm thinking in these final 2 episodes. So, episode 9 is Harry and Lara, like, they resolve their differences on Demon Reach or whatever, but then they have some, like, big altercation that takes place, with, like, Cowl, Nemesis, some like, that culmination, starts in this episode where we've set them up, previously, in in the plot lines that came from White Knight. Now they're just your main foe because you're not going to do the Titan here because again we haven't introduced the Fae, and the Titan is more aligned I think to the Fae because of her like direct conflicts with Mab throughout that whole thing. So I think you have to save the Titan for when you talk Fae. So here, I think we just use Cowl, and you can have Nemesis, and because it's Nemesis, you can bring in outsiders if you want to make it huge, grand scale, for them to try to like you figure out and not die. But also, this whole time, they're trying to figure out how to actually save and help Thomas, and then so you do that like big battle, but then you find out maybe at the very end that it was actually Justine who was infected by Nemesis. And that's why Thomas did the thing with the Svartalfs, and you have this big reveal, and it's like, oh crap, now we have to get to Justine. She gets away, and then the like final episode is Harry and Lara getting Thomas out of Demon Reach, as they've like found a way to like cure him or help him or however you want to do that. I think you need that, or maybe you don't. Maybe they haven't figured it out, and you concentrate more on setting up Nemesis and Cowl to be like an even bigger, foe for the rest of the series. But I feel like you have to make Thomas in that prison cell be the like main driver of the final episode of this White Court season, whether it's them actually saving him or not being able to save him and leaving you on this like, oh shit, what now? Like how are they gonna like what are they gonna do now? And I think that's a very satisfying end to a season for television. And you've knocked out your White Court. You have introduced Thomas and Lara to the story. I personally, while I said that you can kind of do either one, I think that if you don't save Thomas at the very end of this. I think you have to find a way to save Thomas very early so that he can be around for some of the stuff that's going to happen later, basically, because you have had to mess with the timeline again because all of these storylines like jump so many books. You kind of have to bounce back and forth in order to follow them for the TV adaptation. But that is season 3. That's the White Court season in my mind. What is your favorite part of the White Court story so far, or what would you be most excited to see adapted to TV from that? Let me know down in the comments. And if you're on, obviously, if you're on YouTube, and subscribe while you're there, like the video, do all of those things. I would really appreciate it. And if you're listening on a podcast app, go ahead and leave a 5-star review. And remember, life is short. Drive that trusty blue Beetle and curl up in your basement apartment with a good book. Fuego the whole damn building. If anyone ever has a problem with that, just make sure that Bob makes it out okay. And you get your trusty neighborhood smart elves to be able to do whatever they have to do so that you can have just enough power to catch the next episode of Belated Binge.